Hi, friendos. Welcome back to Mass Effect Codex. Let's read things, shall we? I'm not sure if... Yeah, I'm pretty sure all of those are... all of those are not highlighted, so...
The Elcor are... The Volus are a member species of the Citadel with their own embassy, but they are also a client race of the Turians. Centuries ago, they were voluntarily absorbed into the hierarchy, effectively trading their mercantile prowess for Turian military protection. Erun, their homeworld, lies far beyond the normal life zone of its star. However, the world has a high-pressure greenhouse atmosphere that traps enough heat to support an ammonia-based biochemistry. As a result, the Volus must wear pressure suits and breathers when dealing with other species, as conventional nitrogen-oxygen air mixtures are poisonous to them, and in the low-pressure atmospheres tolerable to most species, their flesh will actually split open.
Oof.
Volus culture is tribal, bartering lands and even people to gain status. This culture of exchange inclines them to economic pursuits. It was the Volus who authored the Unified Banking Act, and they continue to monitor and balance the Citadel economy.
It's very interesting that... I'm not sure if I specifically heard that, but it makes a lot of sense that the way their society works, you know, bartering everything to gain status, even people, which, I mean, I don't agree with, but I'm also not Volus, you know. It's just kind of how they are. That really borders on, and probably could be called slavery to me. But the thing is that, you know, in this world, it's interesting how it's just kind of a thing. They barter even people. But maybe it's less slavery-like than I would initially think of it as. But see, this kind of thing has this immediate negative connotation to most people anymore, because everyone's like, slavery's bad, you know? And of course it is. I mean, thing is, I'm a white American, and my ancestors were buttheads. Let's just say that, and I don't think I need to say anything else, because everyone watching probably knows what I'm talking about, but, you know, it's like, you know. I don't know, it's very interesting how that just ended up being a thing. They barter people, even. But because of bartering being so important, and that exchange being so important to their culture, they're very economically inclined, and it's interesting how they can take that economic mindset and apply it to a scale much bigger than their tribes so successfully. And the Volus are very interesting too because of their suits. Now, I am really interested. I don't think female Volus are represented at all. I think that's a shame. Unless they reproduce in a different kind of a way, but I don't think that's ever implied. In fact, the Asari are the only species in which that's ever applied as far as I remember. So I'm pretty sure there are female Volus, just like there are female Turians, but you literally see no female Turians until ME3. Which, at least as far as I remember, now there's a female Turian mentioned in ME2. Garrus mentions one that he had, a fling with. Let's say that. Which I love that entire conversation. But, yeah, like, I feel like female members of species should be more represented. Now, in video games these days, there are definitely more females represented in general, and I love that so much. Now, granted, you could look at it kind of cynically and be like, oh, they're just doing that in order to appeal to all of these, you know, all these rights groups and blah blah blah, you know, kind of like, you know, for example, they're also representing LGBTQ people more as well in games, and probably for similar reasons. But no matter why they're doing it, if the characters are well written, it doesn't matter, right? Now, of course, that's not always true. However, it's not always true that anything's well written. Either way, I enjoy the fact that there are more females and more LGBTQ people in video game, because I'm bi, okay? And I have a lot of female friends, and I really respect everyone for being people, because discrimination is stupid and useless and just limits humankind in ridiculous ways. Anyway.
Noveria is a cool, rocky world with most of its hydrosphere locked up in massive glaciers. A privately chartered colony world, the planet is owned by the Noveria Development Corporation Holding Company. The NDC is funded by investment capital from 24 high-technology development firms and administrated by an executive board representing their interests. The investors built remote hot labs in isolated locations across Noveria's surface. These facilities are used for research too dangerous or controversial to be performed elsewhere, as Noveria is technically not part of Citadel space and therefore exempt from council law. By special arrangement, Citadel's special tactics and reconnaissance agents have been granted extraterritorial privileges, but it remains to be seen how committed the executive board is to that principle. Given its unique situation, it is understandable that Noveria is often implicated in all manner of wild conspiracy theories.
Yeah, like for example, they tried to bring back the fucking Rachni. Now, granted, they did, and we let the Queen go free, but they tried to bring back the Rachni in order to be soldiers, which didn't work, because if they aren't raised by the Queen, they go nutso and want to kill everything. So that's nice job. Good job. You did it. Anyway, I don't have much to say about Noveria because, well, we just saw all of that bullshit, right? in the Let's Play. If you're just watching the Codex like in a row right now and you haven't watched the Let's Play itself yet, and if you don't ever watch it, that's cool. Like, I love the fact that you're even listening to this. But all I know is I find it extremely interesting but extremely spooky. As to, how Noveria functions the way it does, but this does definitely shed light on why why specifically Noveria is a lot of ways that it is. Like, why they're so resistant to the whole Spectre thing. It's because they aren't even technically in Citadel space, but we were given extra territorial privileges for the express, purpose of still being able to regulate things out here. But they fought against it for a little bit there when we landed, if you remember, from either your own playthroughs or my own Let's Play. And what was the other thing? It's made by investment and technology development firms and etc. And it's just there in order to, let companies do things that I'm sure they think are going to be profitable, but it's kind of sad that profit is such a thing. I really feel like the entire, structure of business and economy in this world should be restructured so that ethics is so ingrained in everything that this kind of shit doesn't happen in real life, because these kind of things do happen in real life, just not, just not with the sci-fi event, of course, which, is scary. Anyhow, very spoopy. Moving on. I do believe that is all the primaries. Let's read the secondaries. Oh. I'm not sure Asari... I'm not sure I do not know if I read Asari Culture. And because it's the first highlighted thing, I can't really check if I did or not. So I'll read this. Because, yeah, I don't remember if I read this before. Because of their long lifespan, Asari tend to have a long view, not common in other races. Makes sense. When they encounter a new species or situation, the Asari are more comfortable with an extended period of passive observation and study than immediate action. They are unfazed that some of their investments or decisions may not pay off for decades or centuries. Matriarchs can seem to make incomprehensible decisions, but their insight is evident when their carefully laid plans come to fruition. Makes a lot of sense. In interstellar relations, this long view manifests as an unspoken policy of centrism. The Asari instinctively seek to maintain stable balances of economic, political, and military power. Traditionally, Asari spread their influence through cultural domination and intellectual superiority. They invite new species of advanced development to join the galactic community, knowing that their ideals and beliefs will inevitably influence the existing culture. Very interesting. Very, very, like, you know, I've been known to write characters in my own stories that have lived a very long time, or are within a species or what have you that have a very long lifespan or will live very long for whatever reason. And I never really thought about the long view thing, but it makes a lot of sense. It really makes a lot of sense, and maybe that's why Benezia made the decision to join Macerin to begin with. She didn't know about the Sovereign thing, but it was clear that she ended up being around him for whatever reason. I really wonder why. You know, I really wonder what happened to bring her to Saren to begin with, because I don't think that's ever talked about. But it might have to do with this long view thing. Anywho, very interesting. And honestly, I feel like this is not really reflected in Liara much, because in Mass Effect 2, she makes some really rash short-term decisions. Well, I don't know if... Actually, you know what? She plays a really long game with the Shadow Broker, so maybe this is... I don't know, I'll have to kind of think about if Liara's actions are applicable to this long view thing. Although, granted, she's still young, but she's also over 100 years old already. She's older than... I think she said she was 106. Now, I don't know if any human alive, or had been alive, has ever lived to 100... I feel like the oldest human alive was at least a little older than 106. I feel like I heard that somewhere, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, she's 106 years old already. She's already older than most humans would have been. She has a very juvenile type outlook, though. I feel like... at least I kind of feel like it, though. But granted, remember, she's been not... If you think about the fact that she's been isolating herself for most of that time, probably, you know, as a person who isolated himself for a long time, and still kind of does, I'm working on that, you know, it makes a lot of sense that she'd have rather a juvenile, naive view, because you shelter yourself enough, and you become really, really not privy to the workings of anything, or how to deal with it, you know, anything. So yeah, she comes off as much younger than she is in a like mature. Like if you think of someone who's really old in real life, you know, like 80, 90 something, they're usually pretty wise people, right? Pretty like grounded. Like, granted, yes, there's always exceptions. There's old people that are bitter and angry and rah rah, but there's also, like, you know, people that are very grounded, very, very wise. You know, and of course there's also going to be exceptions outside of those two rules, even, because humans are diverse and cool and awesome. However, you know, I just find this very fascinating, I suppose. Moving on. Sorry, government. I find that it's already fascinating, so I'm glad I can sit down, like, really fascinating, so I'm glad I can sit down and listen and read these, and also the Turians, too. So I'm hyped for reading all this. I mean, I find the whole lore fascinating, generally. I just feel like they should have done a little more with it than they did. Granted, though, I haven't really absorbed this codex to this degree before. The main thing that's allowing me to do so is having a purpose other than just reading it for myself. It's interesting. A lot of times that is the main reason I'm going to be doing stuff like this. Anywho, the Asari came late to the concept of world government. For centuries, their homeworld of Thessia was dotted with loose confederacies of great republican cities. The closest earthly equivalent would be the ancient Mediterranean city-states. Since the Asari culture values consensus and accommodation, there was little impetus to form larger principalities. That's interesting. Makes a lot of sense, too. Rather than hoard resources, the Asari bartered freely. Rather than attack one another over differing philosophies, they sought to understand one another. Man, God, humans need to learn from Asari. That would have solved a lot of shit in history. Anyway, only in the information age did the city-states grow close. Communication over internet evolved into an electronic democracy. Asari have no politicians or elections, but a freewheeling, all-inclusive legislature that citizens can participate in at will. Very interesting. Policy debate. So this is like real democracy. A lot of what we call democracy in real life, a lot of people would say is not democracy. But regardless. Policy debates take place at all hours of the day in official chat rooms and forums moderated by specially programmed virtual intelligence. It's very interesting. So, they're using the internet for their entire government, which is very interesting. And I kind of hope that humans don't get there, because we shouldn't be doing something like this. At least that's what I think. But maybe that's just me in knowing the state of the internet as it is now. All aspects of policy but this is a really interesting concept. All aspects of policy are open to plebiscite. I've never heard that word before, but I'm guessing it means plebeians, like anyone at any time. I have to look up plebiscite. I literally do not know the context of that word, but I have a feeling I know the context, but man, I've never heard that word. I like learning new words. This is another reason to read this. In any given debate, the Asari tend to lend the most credence to the opinions of any matriarchs present. Makes sense. Nearly always deferring to the experience of these millennia-old wise women. Makes a lot of sense. Achieving consensus through public debate may take too long in a crisis. In cases where prompt, decisive action is required, the Asari defer to the wisdom of local matriarchs. Makes a lot of sense. Very cool. Turian culture. While Turians are individuals with personal desires, their instinct is to equate the self with the group and set aside personal desires for the good of all. Interesting. But what's funny is Garrus goes against that. He has a lot of personal convictions, and that's basically why he joins up with you. I really like the exceptions to the norm thing that this game really pushes, because there always is. Turians are thought to have a strong sense of personal accountability, the Turian honor that other races find so remarkable. Turians are taught to own every decision they make, good or ill. The worst sin they can make in the eyes of their people is to lie about their own actions. Turians who murder will try to get away with it, but if directly questioned, most will confess the crime. Interesting. That's amazing. Again, very different parallels from the normal human behavior, which I'm guessing it's a lot of this is to make them feel more alien, more give you more wonder about them. Like, well, these are different from humans in this way and that way, in a general sense. Now, of course, there are people who would confess that kind of a thing in real life too, I'm sure. Anyway, Turians have a strong inclination, because again, exceptions to the norm. Turians have a strong inclination toward, directly confess. I mean, of course, a lot of murderers are forced to confess after a case has been built against them, but you know what I mean. Turians have a strong inclination toward public service and self-sacrifice, so they tend to be poor entrepreneurs. Makes a lot of sense. You know what's funny is I also have tendencies of that, but I also kind of feel like I need to be an entrepreneur for my own good, and also just for the fact that I can actually doing things that I can actually positively benefit others from, and not just go with the motions because I actually enjoy this, and other things that I love doing, you know. And so I'm trying to do my best to make a living doing it in a way that's ethical and that helps people, and it's just fun and awesome for people. To compensate, they accepted the mercantile Volus as a client race, offering protection in exchange for their fiscal expertise. Plus, I just want to provide joy for people, and enrich them with creations and the like. That's why I'm doing this series, and other reasons, and other things too. Anywho, moving on, back to the Codex itself. The Turian military is the center of their society. It is not just an armed force. It is an all-encompassing public works organization. Very interesting. The military police are also the civic police. Makes sense? With the Turians and being military-centered. Fire brigades serve the civilian population as well as military facilities. The Corps of Engineers builds and maintains spaceports, schools, water purification plants, and power stations. The Merchant Marine ensures that all worlds get needed resources. Very interesting. The Turians' military doctrine. Although they lack the brutality of the Krogan, the skill of the Asari, and the virtuosity of the humans, the Turian military has formidable discipline. And I think I've touched on this a little before, but I love the roles of the different council races. I really, really do. Ooh. And how they all interweave and connect to form this society that's constantly growing and evolving. Ooh. Officers and NCOs are lifers with years of field experience. Enlisted personnel are thoroughly trained and stay calm under fire. Turian units don't break. Even if their entire line collapses, they fall back in order, setting ambushes as they go. A popular saying holds, you will only see a Turian's back once he's dead. Makes a lot of sense. Boot camp begins on the 15th birthday. Whoa, Jesus. That is young, but makes sense. Military doctrine. Soldiers receive a year of training before being assigned to a field unit. Officers train for even longer. Most serve until the age of 30, at which point they become part of the reserves. Even if they suffer injuries preventing frontline service, most do support work behind the lines. Biotics are uncommon. While admired for their exacting skills, Biotics' motives are not always fully trusted by the common soldier. Interesting. Interesting that their motives aren't trusted. That's what they're worried about. That's interesting. The Turians prefer to assign their Biotics to specialist teams called cabals. Command and control is decentralized and flexible. Individual squads can call for artillery and air support. I wonder why it goes back to their motives. Are they thinking that they'll have that power and they'll use it for ill? Is that it? That's very interesting. Individual squads can call for artillery or air support. They make extensive use of combat drones for light duties and practice combined arms. Infantry operates with armor supported by overhead gunships. Strategically, they are methodical and patient, and dislike risky operations. Tradition is important. Each legion has a full-time staff of historians who chronicle its battle honors in detail. The oldest have records dating back to the Turian Iron Age. If a legion is destroyed in battle, it is reconstituted rather than replaced. Interesting. The Turians recruit auxiliary units from conquered or absorbed minor races. Auxiliaries are generally light infantry or armored cavalry units that screen and support the main Turian formations. At the conclusion of their service in the auxiliaries, recruits are granted Turian citizenship. Makes sense. I don't think... Do Turians have conquered races anymore? Is that still a thing? I think that used to be like way back before the council. But I'm guessing nowadays it's mostly, you know, Solarians, Asari, etc. I don't think they have conquered races anymore. At least I don't think that's ever really brought up, but it makes sense that they used to before the... I don't know. I don't know if that's ever really touched on, the whole auxiliary unit thing, in the actual games. And I'd kind of like to see what they meant by that, if it's ever... But I don't think it is. But don't quote me. I also never did everything, and I'm going to try to basically do that this time. We'll see, though. Turian's Unification War. At about the time the Solarians and Asari were forming the Council, the Turians were embroiled in a bitter civil war. The Unification War, as it was later named, began with hostilities between the colonies furthest from the Turian homeworld, Playin. These colonies were run by local chieftains, many of whom had distanced themselves from the hierarchy. Without the galvanizing influence of the government, the colonies became increasingly isolated and xenophobic. Colonists began wearing emblems or facial markings to differentiate themselves from members of other colonies, and open hostilities became common. When the war finally broke out, the hierarchy maintained strict diplomacy and refused to get involved. After several years of fighting, less than a dozen factions remained, and the hierarchy finally intervened. By that time, the chieftains were too weak to resist. They were forced to put an end to fighting and renew their allegiance to the hierarchy. Though peace was restored, it took several decades for animosity between colonists to fade completely. To this day, most Turians still wear the facial markings of their home colonies. As a point of interest, the Turian term barefaced refers to one who is beguiling or not to be trusted. It is also a slang term for politicians. Since this was flashing, but Cypher is not flashing. I'm guessing beacon is what I need here. Alright. The beacon was a Prothean artifact Earth on the Alliance colony of Eden Prime. We already know that, but I wonder if there's probably some new details I don't think we've really heard. Its resemblance to the Prothean databanks recovered on Mars provoked immediate interest from the Alliance and the Citadel Council. Okay, so that's why the interest was there. I don't think we heard about that. That's very interesting. It makes a lot of sense too. It proved to be a solid-state data storage device, part of a galaxy-spanning comm network similar to the modern extranet. Intact Prothean paleotechnology is rare. The beacon seemed to promise another quantum leap of technology, akin to the discovery of the Mass Effect drive and relays. Unfortunately, the beacon also drew the attention of the rogue Spectre Saren and his Saren Arturius and his synthetic allies, the Geth. A dawn raid by his flagship Sovereign resulted in hundreds of civilian casualties. The beacon was badly damaged. The motives behind the attack are still being investigated. During the recovery operation, the beacon fired a pulse of energy at the executive officer of the Alliance frigate Normandy. Lieutenant Commander Shepard survived and appears to have suffered no ill effects. Afterwards, the beacon fell inert. The mechanism appears to be dead. Oofly doofly. But yeah, we already know all that, but the nice little extra bits of detail are appreciated. Not sure if human diplomatic relations were read before. I'm just going to go ahead and read it just in case. Humanity has encountered many galactic species. Wars have been few, but mistrust is rife. Politically, the Alliance is a peaceful trade partner of the Turians. As a practical matter, however, there is simmering antagonism and bigotry between both populations over the First Contact War of 1957. Except, again, a lot of exceptions. Not Saren, wow. I meant Garrus. Garrus doesn't really seem to care all that much, and my Shepard doesn't either. Like, that's in the past, we're allies now, so, yeah. The Alliance enjoys good relations with the Asari. I wonder why the races are all capitalized here. I really wonder why that happened. Anyway, the Alliance enjoys why they did that. The Alliance enjoys good relations with the Asari, though many privately believe the matriarchs are aristocratic and overcautious. Except, well, There's good reason for that. A lot of them literally are. We'll kind of see that. Though humans know better than to unconditionally trust any Solarian, their shared restless, reckless ways make them natural allies against the conservative Turians and Asari. Well, at least, I can only think of really one that I would say fit those criteria, but maybe, like, regarding the Asari again, but maybe I'm just kind of, maybe projecting a bit, because there's some Asari I don't like, and I don't think they actually fit that criteria, but I'm just not too fond of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Anyway, the Alliance has no formal contract with the Quarians. Their migrant fleet has not yet passed through any human-settled system. The Batarians are rivals for control of the Skillian Verge. They severed their treaties with the Citadel to prosecute a colonial conflict against the Alliance. Officially, there is no war, but neither is there any peace. Systems Alliance Geological Survey. As the human race expands its territory and raises the general standard of living, demand for industrial resources continues to grow. Many planets, moons, and asteroids contain a wealth of resources, but many systems have barely been charted, let alone thoroughly surveyed. Unmanned probes are one solution, but they are often lost to space hazards, unforeseen circumstances, or theft by salvagers. In recent years, AGES, the Alliance Geological Service, interesting and cool little acronym there, has offered bounties to private individuals or teams willing to perform mineralogical surveys on the frontier. This survey data is made publicly available to further corporate development. Due to the cost of travel and the dangers of operating on hostile worlds, it is rarely a profitable endeavor. Light metals. Metals with low atomic weight are often used in the construction of spacecraft and vehicles. Heavy metals. Yeah, I love heavy metal. The music genre. But anyway, let's keep going. Metals with higher atomic weights are used to construct equipment components. The platinum group elements are particularly useful. Rare earths. Most useful materials in this category are radioactives or magnets. Gases. Various gases are required to support all known forms of sapient life. Some are commonly used as fuel. Neato. Alright, FTL drive. I think I read this before. Also, the super deep sciencey stuff is not what I'm really interested in. What I'm interested in is the cultural stuff, the people, the races, how they interact. That's mostly what I've always been interested in. Which means I probably, you know what? Part of me wants to skip this section. I'd really rather focus on the people-y stuff. I'm sorry, friendos. If you want to read the Ships and Vehicles, you can, but I'm not too interested in that or the tech. I'm just going to kind of let... What's funny is that I feel like I'm interested in tech, except right now, not really. I want to focus on the people of this universe. So that's interesting, because sometimes I'm in the mood to read this, but since I'm not really wanting to read that at all, I don't want to force myself to do it, because that'd just not be entertaining to you guys, I don't think. I'd rather not force myself to. So... I also don't think it'd make as good content as the stuff I'm actually interested in, so... Anywho. That is all for Codex right now, friendos. Join me when we next adventure, when we next continue Ada Shepard's adventures. Till then, friendos.